that it completely
ruined
changed
it.
it.
It ruined
Yeah,
it.
ruined it.
Once they become human.
Real, yeah.
And I hear it from my clients all the time. Once, say, they get a comment from a prostitute that says anything about their personal life or their feelings, or that they don't like what they're doing, or they'd rather be eating chow fun at home in front of the TV or something like that, it kills it for them.
Yeah.
That's not the fantasy that they want. They don't want the human being. They want the actress or actor.
And the fantasy is only destructive if it's actually destroying parts of your life. There's nothing wrong with having these fantasies, and there's nothing wrong with objectifying if it's not causing a deleterious effect on your life. If you know what you're doing, right?
Well, every sex addict thinks they know what they're doing. That's the problem. Is
right.
At what point do you know that there's a problem?
Right.
I don't know a single alcoholic, a couple of them, that will admit that they have an alcoholic issue. They will surround themselves around other alcoholics that have a similar or worse problem with it, so they can say, I don't have a problem with it, I go to work. They have a whole list of reasons why it's not a problem. So calling something a problem really means that there's consequences to the behavior.
Yeah.
And one of the consequences of getting into objectification is that it makes it more difficult to be present in a relationship and maintaining intimacy. And that's probably the hardest hurdle for all of my sex-addicted clients, to, once they are sober from sex addiction, how to have healthy sex, how to have intimacy, and how to tolerate, the feeling of quote-unquote boredom, which I don't believe exists. Boredom, to me, it just means internal emptiness, and being reminded that you don't have a strong sense of identity. When a person's bored in Los Angeles, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
If a person has a brain and some creativity, to stay bored means something completely different. There's an infinite way to get out of boredom and to stay interested in another person. And there's also this other part. A sex addict, usually if they're in a relationship, their spouse or partner is interested in them, and they're focused on them. That's why they are good detectives and so on. The sex addict is not interested in another person. They're interested in themselves. There's a selfishness, and I don't like to say the word selfishness because it sounds like it's a judgment. Yeah. But the fact remains is that they're not capable yet of having true empathy or concern or care for other people. And they're focused on them getting their needs met because they're still in a survival mode of, I need to get my needs met. I think the difference between men and women, from what I'm seeing most, is that for men, when they're acting out, sex is a need, and for women, sex is a validation of their self-worth and showing of love. So when I have a sex-addicted client that's not interested in their spouse anymore because they're acting out so much and they're in fantasy world, and she does not just cut it for him, he's just not interested. She takes it quite personally. That means she's not pretty enough, young enough, Asian enough, whatever it is.
Right.
She cannot compete with fantasy, and she knows it. And she sees it as he doesn't love her. He may very well feel that he does, but he can't.
Right.
There's no way to be able to love another person when you're in an addiction, because you have a third party in the middle of the two of you.
What are the benefits and possible disadvantages to treating things like sex addiction or alcoholism as a disease or a psychological disorder, as opposed to treating them as a lack of moral will?
Oh, well, first of all, the sex addict, for example, comes from a place of shame to begin with. To say that it's moral will that is involved just makes that so much worse. They didn't grow up as children saying, you know what I want to be when I grow up? I'm going to be a sex addict.
Right.
It's like telling me that a prostitute, when they were a little girl, that's what they wanted to jack off guys all day long in a massage parlor. That's what they wanted to do. I mean,
right.
It has nothing to do with moral will. It has to do with a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I think that willpower or won't power may not always be a factor in why a person compulsively does something, where it feels like they have to.
So I have a lot of male friends who tell me they're addicted to pornography, and they look at it and use it for hours a day. What can be done to help such people?
Well, if they're serious about doing something about it, there's SAA, for example, to go to. There's meetings that directly deal with it, and you're afforded the comradeship is free. You have comradeship of other people that are improving their lives in that level, and it gives some motivation to do the same. They give it gets a person out of the isolation that comes with that kind of activity, and it helps reframe what is pleasurable to a person. So that's one thing. And of course there's therapy. Some people don't do meetings, but I do believe that a person really needs to get out of the walking in that bad neighborhood called your head and work with another person, and a person that understands everything that's going on with you, so it's not a secret anymore. And I think that's key to beginning the whole deal of recovery, because sex addiction is denial and lies. That's all it is. If a person's into pornography to the point where it is affecting their work and they're complaining about their own behavior, the first thing to do is ask yourself, why am I on the computer? And if I have to be on the computer, put a net nanny or something on there where you can't go on these sites. If a person really wants to, everyone's ambivalent about committing to recovery initially. Yeah. There's always a part that says, I want to, but I don't want to do this. I don't want to be on pornography, but I'm not going to do the obvious, which is get rid of the damn computer.
Right.
You know, if you don't want to be on pornography, you don't get on a computer. It's pretty simple. So there's always this ambivalence, and there's also something all addicts say is called "I can handle it." Those are the most dangerous words an addict can say, because they're assuming they can handle the things that trigger them. That is like putting a diabetic in a cake shop for employment. It's not really fair. Knowing one's own limitations and say, you know, I haven't been able to handle it so far, so I'm not going to assume I can handle X, Y, and Z, and I'm not going to go there.
Would you say that all use of pornography is harmful to a person?
No, not at all. I personally don't have anything against pornography. You know, obviously the people that are in pornography to some extent choose what they do, and they do make money off of it. To some extent it's not a choice, it's how their trajectory went in their life. I know people that are in the porn business, both on I make porn or I act in porn. I wouldn't see them as unhappy people necessarily. But they've come to some conclusions about themselves that they've accepted. Some of them are very unhappy people. So I think you're going to find the same spectrum in terms of, you know, whether pornography is good for people. I don't think it helps people with intimacy. I do give that. I do think it may help stimulate people that have a low, desire problem. But it doesn't teach a person to handle intimacy. To some extent, porn exists in all cultures. Anyone that can draw with a stick in the sand can do porn, right? But I think we're in a society where sex addiction has gone way out of proportion to where it used to be, because of the internet.
Yeah.
The
Just
amount,
the last
the amount of
15 years.
variety and the ability to basically